Hello, friends. Today I want to talk about Ernest Sato's diaries. This is the latest edition I've produced, if you can see that. It's available on Amazon, paperback, not too expensive. There are more expensive editions. Um, but anyway, what I'm going to do is share uh, the s- text. There we are. Um, So we've got A Diplomat in Japan, Part Two, The Diaries of Ernest Sato, 1870 to 1883, transcribed from the Sato papers, annotated and indexed by Ian Ruxton, Professor of English, Kyushu Institute of Technology. Well, now I'm a retired from there and a Professor Emeritus. With an introduction by Sahyu Kortatsi, Her Britannic Majesty's Ambassador to Japan, 1980 to 84, famous Japan scholar. Um, So now I'm just going to try and move down. There we are. That's a young Ernest Sato in December 1869. This is from the Yokohama archives. Um, this is William Willis, Sato's friend, the good doctor, medical doctor. Also, I got permission from the Yokohama archives. This one is a rare photograph of Francis Ottiwell Adams from the Kagoshima Reimeikan. This is Youthful Sir Harry Parkes, also from the Kagoshima Reimeikan. Um, this one is Sato, Baron Hubner, and Adams enjoy an evening at the house of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sawa Nobuyoshi, in 1871. Um, it's from Josef Alexander Freiherr von Hubner's book, Ein Spaziergang um die Welt. Kind of globe-trotting book. And this one is, let's see, um, again, it's from the same book, courtesy of Professor Peter Panzer. Sato and Hubner visiting a Japanese home and bowing in the Japanese way. Um, and these are the principal places in Japan visited by Sato. Uh, We've got the Boso Peninsula, Yokohama, Yokosuka, Enoshima, uh, and so on. Izu Peninsula. Whoops, try and make it larger. Atami, Izu Peninsula, Hakone, Hida, Mount Fuji. Oh, he didn't. I don't think he went to Mount Fuji. Kyoto, Nara, Osaka, Kobe, and Shimonoseki, Nagasaki, and Kagoshima. Okay. The main, and this is the contents. I have already read the introduction by Sahyu Kortatsi in a separate video. Here's the copyright notice. My thanks to Sahyu, who died some years ago. First published by Lulu, and I think you'll find it is still there in a large paperback, 8.5 by 11 inch. You probably wouldn't want something as big as that. The one I showed you is 6 by 9. It's the most recent one. Relevant books by the same author. That's me. Uh, I'll slowly scroll through this. You can pause if you like. Um, this is my preface. Okay, shall I read this? Okay. Editor's preface. Sir Ernest Sato, PC GCMG, 1843 to 1929, is best known for two books: his monumental and important Handbook for Diplomats, A Guide to Diplomatic Practice, first published during his retirement in 1917, which has gone through several revised editions, and A Diplomat in Japan, which first appeared in 1921. The latter volume is for the most part based closely on his diaries, journals for the period 1862 to 1869, with minor rewrites and alterations of wording here and there. It was translated into Japanese and has been a bestseller ever since it first appeared. It is still available as a popular paperback today, a testament to its perceived importance as a unique record written by a foreign observer in a privileged position of the major turning point in Japanese history, which was the end of the Tokugawa shogunate Bakumatsu, and the beginning of the Meiji period, Meiji Ishin. The present book is one which Sato never got around to publishing himself in his lifetime. It is in effect the sequel to A Diplomat in Japan, since it consists of his diaries for the period 1870 to 1883 when he was still serving in Japan. And so I believe that the title, A Diplomat in Japan Part 2, is justified. Readers may feel that it is light on political matters as compared with accounts of travels in Japan, Germany, and Italy, and visits to concerts and other pleasures in London and Paris. Certainly, Sato seems to have had more time for touring Japan in a leisurely way than in the early days. In any case, it constitutes a fascinating and very detailed daily record, and it gives me great pleasure to be able to make this material more easily accessible, both to scholars and to the educated reading public. One can only assume and hope that this would have been in accordance with Sato's own wishes, as he caused all of his diaries and letters, the Sato papers referenced PRO 30/33, to be deposited soon after his death under the terms of his will at the Public Record Office, now part of the National Archives of the UK. Ian Ruxton, Kyushu Institute of Technology, KIT, August 2009. Okay, and while I'm at it, I might as well read through Sir Hugh's introduction, even though I've read it separately on another video. Introduction by Sir Hugh Kortatsi. Sato's Diaries, 1870 to 1883. In the distinguished career of Sir Ernest Sato, 1843 to 1929, the years 1870 to 1883 were an interlude during which he sometimes must have felt that he was marking time and making no progress in life. The 13 years covered by this diary came between the exciting time which Sato had experienced in the run-up to the Meiji Restoration of 1868, and which he described so graphically in his memoir, A Diplomat in Japan, London, 1921, and 1884, when he was appointed as Consul General in Bangkok and was set on a diplomatic career. As Japanese secretary with the local rank of second secretary, which was eventually accorded him, his work consisted largely of producing summaries of the limited Japanese press of the time, of translating official Japanese documents, and occasional interpreting. His hours in the legation chancery from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. were far from arduous, and as his diary reveals, he was able to get away from Tokyo for longish periods, enabling him to travel widely in central Japan at a time when traveling in the interior was difficult and time-consuming. His relations with Sir Harry Parkes, the British minister, were often difficult. Sir Harry was a hard taskmaster and was often intolerant and arrogant towards Japanese with whom he came in contact. Sato, who had a better understanding and sympathy with Japanese feelings than his boss, was inevitably critical of Parkes from time to time. But Parkes, whatever his failings, was astute and recognized Sato's abilities. As a result, Sato was able to attend some meetings from which, because of his relatively low diplomatic rank, he might have been excluded. Parkes also entrusted Sato with some delicate missions, such as that to Satsuma in 1877 and to Korea in 1879. We do not know what Parkes said about Sato to those in charge of personnel in the Foreign Office, as the records have long since been destroyed, but he must have reported favorably. Otherwise, Sato would not have been promoted to the post of Consul General in Bangkok, and very exceptionally, transferred from the Japanese consular service to the diplomatic service. Parkes was doubtless aware that Sato had a Japanese common law wife, and this fact was surely reported to the Foreign Office. This fact did not prevent his eventual promotion to become minister at Tokyo in 1895, although it may have delayed this appointment for a year or two, and subsequently as minister at Peking in 1900. Nor did it stand in the way of his appointments in the Order of St. Michael and St. George, in which he was eventually made a Knight Grand Cross, GCMG. These years may have been an interlude for Sato, but they were significant ones in the modernization of Japan. This was the era in which the leaders of the Meiji Restoration consolidated their hold on power, successfully destroyed the old feudal system, and established a unitary state. The modernization of the Japanese economy was begun, and a new legal framework developed. The regime faced various internal threats, culminating in the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, and began to flex its muscles in relations with its Asian neighbors. The main aim of the regime in relation to the Western powers during this decade was the achievement of equality. This meant revision of the unequal treaties of 1858, and in particular the removal of the extraterritorial rights in Japan of the treaty powers. This was not in fact achieved until the revised treaty was signed with Britain in 1894, but it was a major factor in Anglo-Japanese relations in these years. Much of the work of the legation was, however, taken up with aspects of the modernization of Japan, for which Japan employed many foreign advisors, almost half of whom were recruited from Britain. Sato's diaries during this period do not provide a running commentary on the changes taking place in Japan, nor do they give a summary of Anglo-Japanese relations during this period. For this, the student must rely on the dispatches and letters from the legation at Tokyo, or as it was so often still termed Yedo or Edo. Diaries are often tantalizing. The snippets of conversations make one wish that Sato had kept a full record. Only rarely does Sato reveal in his comments his real feelings and reactions to events. We hear nothing about his family life. He is thus generally discreet. He is not a latter-day Pepys, and any reader who expects to have a full and frank commentary on his life in Japan in the 1870s will be disappointed. This said, however, there is much of real interest to the student of Japanese history in the early Meiji period, and to anyone intrigued by the career of Ernest Sato. A large part of these diaries deals with the journeys which Sato made in Japan with various companions, including Francis Ottiwell Adams, while he was Secretary of Legation, and with Lieutenant Hawes, with whom he produced the first guidebook to central Japan. We who have become used to modern Japanese roads and railways will wonder at the time and effort which Sato had to expend in traveling over relatively short distances, although those of us who reached Japan immediately after the end of the Second World War will recall the appalling state of Japanese roads in those days. Sato accomplished many of his journeys largely on foot, often in appalling weather, wet and cold, or steamy, and beset by mosquitoes and horseflies. He mentions frequently that he had to rely on Japanese straw sandals, waraji. In a number of places there were no bridges and they had to ford the river or be carried across. Alternative methods of transport, apart from riding on horseback, included the kago or palanquin, or the newly introduced jinrikisha, the rickshaw. The inns varied in quality and comfort. Once or twice he found that they lacked even tatami mats. He did, however, allow himself the comfort of a European pillow, which he took with him, and 2 cheroots each day. The food, too, left much to be desired. Sometimes they were lucky if they could even find any eggs. They sometimes had a supply of Liebig's extract with them, but more often relied on fish caught in local streams. Sato was not a wealthy man and no doubt had to count his pennies. Prices in sen may seem minute to us today, but they have to be seen in the context of the low cost of living at the time and the general poverty of the Japanese peasantry. Some of the rickshaw and cargo bearers were a rough lot and bargained hard. The travellers often needed guides who were also of varying ability and limited local knowledge. These diary entries should be compared with the accounts given in the Handbook for Travellers in Central and Northern Japan, produced by Sato and Hawes and first published in 1881. This was the basic volume which developed into the various editions of Murray's Guide to Japan. Sato's diary also covers visits to Kyoto, which he got to know well. On the 27th of December 1872, he records a visit to the Kabuki at the Minamiza, to which he repaired at 3 in the morning. He bought many additions to his library of Japanese books in Kyoto. He also visited Nikko and Lake Chuzenji more than once. The diary includes an account of climbing Mount Fuji with his friend F.V. Dickens, as well as of visits to other mountains in what came to be called the Japanese Alps. So he did climb Fuji. Sato was clearly a knowledgeable, if amateur, botanist. His frequent descriptions of flowers and plants are worthy of study by a modern plantsman. It is interesting to read that bears as well as wild boars were often encountered. Important Japanese with whom Sato records contacts include, among others, such leading figures as Saigo Takamori, Kichinosuke, Iwakura Tomomi, Katsukaishu Awanokami, Ito Hirobumi, Okubo Toshimichi, Kido Takayoshi, Terashima Munenori, and Prince and Princess Higashi Fushimi. But sadly, only rarely do his comments reveal new sidelights on them and their attitudes. Sato was with some of them at geisha parties where they relaxed in the childish atmosphere which marks so many such occasions even today. Sato's account of a race meeting on the 5th of November 1871 is an example where one wishes that Sato had had a camera. When he returned to Japan from Europe in January 1877, reaching Nagasaki on the 28th of January, he found a letter from Sir Harry Parkes and began his journey to Kagoshima in Satsuma, where his old friend Dr. William Willis was working as a doctor and training Japanese medical students. The Satsuma Rebellion was beginning. Sato's journey was tough and dangerous, and he did not reach Yokohama until the 7th of March. The account of this journey is one of the highlights of these diaries. Parkes and he dined with Iwakura on the 9th of March 1877, and Sato was able to describe the orderly conduct of the rebels both in the town and on the march. On the 19th of March, Parkes and he visited Terashima at the Foreign Office. In reply to questions from the chief, he, Terashima, seemed to imply that the government would not be in a hurry to offer an amnesty, and when Sir Harry said he hoped it would not be necessary to cut off Saigo's head, he preserved a dignified silence. On the 24th of March, Parkes took Sato with him to call on Iwakura, who thought that there would be some hard fighting shortly. When on the 31st of March, Sato called on Katsuawa, the latter said that the successes reported on the side of the government are all moonshine. Katsuawa, that's Katsukaishu, isn't it? As the account of this conversation given by Sato makes clear, Katsu was sympathetic with the rebels and wished that Sahari could find an opportunity of interposing with friendly advice to prevent further bloodshed. Having written over 20 years ago a biography of Dr. William Willis in Japan, I was glad to see Sato's account of the farewell dinner for Willis at the Grand Hotel in Yokohama on the 7th of July, and to note the tribute to him from Dr. Hebern, who all students of Japan know for his system of Romanization. The account which Sato gives of his visit to Korea in late 1878, see entries beginning on 13th November 1878 to 2 December 1878, is also of particular interest as it underlines how cut off Korea was at that time, even from China and Japan. The fact that Sato was given this task confirms that Parkes, even if he did not like Sato, appreciated his abilities. Parkes was away on leave following the death of his wife when the young princes Arthur and George, later King George V, visited Japan in HMS Bacante. The official account is contained in the cruise of Her Majesty's ship Bacante, 1789 to 1882, compiled, that should be 1789? Really? 1879, I think, should be, not 1789. Compiled by John N. Dalton, London, 1886. Sorry about that, a typo. Sato was deputed to go with them to the Kansai. His account of the visit, 24th of October 1881 to 11th of November, and his involvement is discreet, although he notes on 6th of November that after dinner there were dramatic performances, but Prince George made me come over and sit by him while he had a tiger tattooed on his arm, and I lost it all. For further details about royal tattoos, see Japanese Tattooists and the British Royal Family by Noboru Koyama in Britain and Japan, biographical portraits edited by Hugh Cortazzi, Global Oriental, 2007. Sato had 2 sets of leave in Europe during these years. There are only occasional references to Japan in his diaries of his European tours. One account of a conversation at the Foreign Office, 13th of September 1876, reveals not only his doubts about Parkes, but also his hopes for eventual revision of the treaties. The main interest of these entries lies in its reflection of Sato's cultural interests. Like many Europeans who have immersed themselves in Japan, he longed for elements of European civilization. He was thus an avid visitor to museums such as the Uffizi in Florence. He particularly longed to hear good classical music, and his diary contains accounts of many concerts which he attended and enjoyed. Music remained a favorite pursuit back in Japan also, where he played pieces with European friends such as Mrs. Aston. He played the piano, by the way, I think. We have to remember that in those days there were none of the concerts or performances that are so frequent in Japan today, nor were there yet galleries or exhibitions of Western art. Students of Japanese history, of Anglo-Japanese relations, and of Ernest Sato should be grateful to Ian Ruxton for all his efforts in transcribing and making available the text of these diaries. Hugh Cortazzi, August 2009. And I'm very grateful to Sir Hugh for his introduction. I'm now going to read a bit of the diary itself. I'll just carry on. So we're looking at 1870. The PRO reference is there. December the 7th, it's the only entry for 1870. Adams, that's F.O. Adams, and I went to tell the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Sawa Nobuyoshi, that Adams intended going from Hyogo to Uwajima with Date Ko and thence probably to Kagoshima, perhaps overland. He was very pleasant, took notes of Adams' route, and promised to give notice to those concerned. We then got him on the subject of his adventures. About 8 years ago, his life being threatened by the shogun's government, he fled with Sanjo, Shijo, Nijo, Higashikuze, Mibu, and another Kuge, court noble, to Choshu. This is the Shichi Kyo Ochi. After a while, he got tired of Choshu and, going to Tajima with the intention of returning secretly to Kyoto, got together by degrees a number of men. But when on the point of starting, some difficulty occurred, in consequence of which his freedom was endangered. So he fled to Saijo in Izo, town of a cadet of Kishu, thinking that the shogun's government would not look for him in so unlikely a place. He had a retainer related by marriage to the wives of 2 doctors in Saijo. Here he disguised himself as a leper by painting his face, let his eyebrows grow, and wore a queue. The doctor inferred that the blackness of his teeth, from which he could not remove all the dye worn by Kuges, was only a symptom of the rottenness of his body in general. The police of the shogun failed to recognize him under his disguise, misled by the description they had of his appearance. A hole was dug for him under the veranda of one of his doctors, who never betrayed him, wherein he lived a whole month. And when he, and here are two footnotes, one about Adams and the other about Sawa Nobuyoshi, Sato's writing in A Diplomat in Japan. Please pause the video if you want to read those. I'm carrying on with the main diary text. So, and when he issued therefrom, his legs would not support him. After that, he removed to the other doctor's house and abode in Saijo altogether 6 months, after which he returned to Choshu, having escaped by his absence the fate of Sanjo and the others, who were handed over to the government and placed in the custody of a daimyo of Izo. On the restoration of the Mikado, he had been pardoned. He has a son of one of the doctors, now dead, but a very intelligent man with a large practice in his service now. He drew a comparison between the hardships he suffered in his voluntary exile and those he labored under as Minister for Foreign Affairs. Then, if he had made a false step, his life would have been the only forfeit, but now his life would not suffice to repair any great error. Talking of Higo, in which province he said that there were still many pig-headed people, Gankona, he said that certain places in the interior, named Goka no Sho, Mera, and Nasu, are inhabited by the descendants of the Heike, who fled thither after their defeat at Shimonoseki by the Genji. They live by hunting with animals whose skins they sell, and thus are enabled to purchase rice and other necessaries. Only the rich families can afford to eat salt. Nasu is under the jurisdiction of Nagasaki, and whilst he was governor there, he made an excursion with the view of penetrating into the mountains, but the inhabitants refused to admit him. The shoya, village headman of the place, the mayor in French, was sent for and declared the population to be about 500 souls. But there is no reason to suppose that they are not more numerous. They pay a little more than 1 koku's worth of taxes. Yesterday we visited the tombs of Husken and Denkichi, secretary to the American legation and linguist to us at Korinji by the river. The inscriptions are as follows. Dankuchi, Japanese linguist to the British legation, murdered by Japanese assassins, 29th of January 1860. Sacred to the memory of Henry C.J. Husken, interpreter to the American legation in Japan, born at Amsterdam, January the 20th, 1832, died at Yedo, January the 16th, 1861. Well, that's a very short, that's only one entry for the whole of 1870. We'll carry on a bit with 1871 and see how far we can get. 1871, May the 27th, that's the first entry for 1871, wrote to Bernard Quaritch, antiquarian bookseller of London, offering to purchase Siebold's map of Japan, marked 3 and 6, i.e. 3 shillings and sixpence, in his catalogue. June 12th, wrote to Henry Sotheran, antiquarian bookseller of London, to order new education law. July 20th, Saito Gondai Sanji of Fukuyama in Bingo called on me today. He says there are a number of Christians in the charge of his clan who seem to be very well-meaning people and conduct themselves with the greatest propriety. He wanted to take 3 or 4 of them under his own separate charge, but the government would not permit it. They are not treated cruelly, he says. He was 7 years in prison under the old government for advocating the Kinno, loyalty to the emperor, policy. He also says that an idea is abroad that foreign studies are only adapted to the attainment of wealth and that we don't study morals. I gave him the names of Bacon's essays and Grotius de Jure Belli et Pacis, and told him there were many other writers on morals and philosophy in Europe. The Fukuyama people want me to visit them. Their Kurayashiki at Osaka is in the Tosabori, Ichome. July 26th, spent the day with Minami Torajiro and Komatsu, other name is blank, of Chikuzen. First at the Kitsune Unagi in Kinrokucho by the Sanjiken Bori, and then in boats to Nakamuraya, the great restaurant by the Ryogokubashi. There were also Kajiwara Heima, now Kage, and Hirozawa Tomijiro, whom I had not seen for 5 and 4 years respectively. Also Nagaoka Keijiro and Dewa Sataro, likewise of Aizu, and Hayakawa Isami, Daisanji of Fukuoka. Geishas were Saizo and Tonko of Shimbashi, and Tsurukichi, Kokatsu, Okatsu, Ogin, Mio, and Aya of Yanagibashi. Mon, a beautiful siren who was in the next room with the Prince of Higo and a lot of other men, also came in. Notice the spelling of Aizu there, which is with a D. At this point, Romanji was not settled in the way it is today. July 27th, Dango no Daichu, Kawada, Kitagaki Danjo Daijunsatsu, Oki Totori Handai Sanji, Ichiguchi Dai Sakuan called on me. No conversation of any importance. July 28th, Saigo Kichinosuke, Saigo Takamori, called on me. He was very reticent. He tells me that he does not know how long he shall stay. Osumi no Kami is still in bed of dropsy, but not dying or dead. Saigo says he was in exile at the time of Richardson's murder in 1862. That's the Namamugi incident. Charles Lennox Richardson only came out after the bombardment of Kagoshima in 1863, was exiled 3 times. The affair at Hita in Bungo this spring was a mere peasants' insurrection. His clan has over 3,000 troops here. July 29th. With Tanzan's pupil Okawa Heibei to Kashiwaya by side of the Ryogokubashi. Geishas from Shimmei-mai Wakakichi, Kozuru, Asakichi, and Fusakichi, the 2 latter little girls, and from Yanagibashi Oriki with the voice, Koriki, reputed a beauty, Omocha and Koida dancing Fiet. August the 3rd, Festival of Akiha at the Wakasa Yashiki and performance of Kyogen, preceded by dances of geisha. Tayasu Kujo, Tsuzuki Hyogo, ancient governor of Sado, were in the same loge. Narita's daughters, Osuzu and Anne, were there also. I was astonished to hear Narita ask the sake shop boy who was dressed as a girl, and this is a rather vulgar part, Omankuni Kega Haitaka, and that before his daughter. About dusk, we adjourned to Narita's house and drank sake till late. Owaka, one of his maidservants, was as free with the word ochinko as Narita himself with omanko. Geisha, Nanaharu, pretty, and Koden. This is unexpurgated version of his diaries. No cuts. August 12th, with Ishizaka, other name is blank, and Ito Takehiko at Daikokuya by Imado. Geishas, Metama, Somikichi, and Wakakichi, the latter 2 great fun. In boat on the river to fish. Sano Ikunosuke, Ono Kaizo, my teacher, Ohara Gonzaburo, my major domo. Out nearly all day. There were 2 men of Nakamura in Oshu who said they had been swindled by E. Schnell out of 9,000 ryo in August 1868, and they showed me documents in Dutch and French, which showed that he had received the money, but more I could not make out. August the 13th, the entry is barely legible. Okubo, Saigo, Okuma, and Sasaki Sangi dismissed from office. Kido alone remains. Sanjo, Iwakura, Saga, and Tokudaiji as before. Kujo Danji no In, Konogi Ingi Haku, dismissed. Also, Shishido Gyobu Shoyu to Yamagata Hyobu Shoyu. Ishikami thinks some may be called back to office. The Danjodai and Hyobu Sho perhaps amalgamated. Danjodai officers have been sent against Satake-han, as I learnt from Narita and Ito Takehiko. They said clan is implicated in the conspiracy of the spring by the confession of the Kuge Otagi. August the 18th, 1871. Edie and I went to a feast with the Obama people near the Ushigome Gate to arrange terms of his engagement with them. Namikata was the Shosanji who is in charge of the schools. Edie is to have a ryo a day and various allowances provided, and he is to go for 200 days. There were present also Muramatsu Daisanji, Morooka Daisakuan, Narita, and 1 or 2 others. Geisha from Sakamachi named Miyokichi. August 21. Visited by Namekata with copy of Edie's agreement, sent him with translation to Miyamoto. Also, Saito Daisanji of Fukuyama in Bingo, Abe, and Nakamura Shigeakira of Fukuchiyama in Tango, also a Daisanji. Onodera of Sendai, a former acquaintance at Yokohama, and Yonai Michijiro of Morioka, formerly Nambu. Nearly all the officials dismissed have been replaced. The changes are the addition of Saigo Kichinosuke, that's Saigo Takamori, with the rank of Sho Sammi to be Sangi. Saito dismissed. Okubo made Okura Kyo. Okura made Okura Taiyu. Goto Shojiro made Kobu Taiyu. No one has yet been reappointed to the Danjo Dai or Gyobusho, the amalgamation of those two offices being in contemplation. Kido, Okimimpe, Yamagata, and Ito retain their places. Inoue Bunda goes to the Mimbusho as Shoyu. Arisugawa no Miya is made Chiji, governor of Fukuoka, and Kawada of the Danjodai is made his Daisanji. 5 Sanji of Fukuoka have been decapitated, nominally for forging kinsatsu, gold notes. Inoue Bunda, I think that's Inoue Kaoru. August 22nd. Started from Edo by carriage with Adams and Baron Hübner at 7:15 and arrived at the Hodogaya Honjin Inn at 10. Drank and slept. Ate, drank and slept. Should be, really. Started again at a 11:45 and reached Kamiya at Fujisawa at 1:30. Charm over a door consisting of the name Chinsei Hachiro Tametomo Ko on Yado, written on a piece of paper, and an awabi shell by it. Visited the temple at Fujisawa called Fujisawa Dera. Fat, good-natured priest on right-hand side of entrance of Hondo, who pressed us to sit down, gave us tea, distributed plans and printed descriptions of the temple, and told us that the treasures, Homotsu, were being insect-dried, and that we might perhaps see a few of them. So we went to the abbot's quarters and found a quantity of dusty lacquer, old pottery, and voluminous scrolls of illustrated manuscripts, a portrait of Godai Gotenno, and a book on antiquities called, what's that? Shuko-Jushu, I think. Printed privately for the daimyo of Kuana 60 years ago. Impressions of ancient seals, inscriptions, drawings of arms, etc. In a set of rooms, which had been occupied by the Mikado on his journey to Edo, were some beautiful screens. The best subjects were the chidori, which looked like seagulls, winter scenes, sakura and matsu covered with snow and birds perched on them, maples and wild cherries in blossom. Returned to Kamiya, the Jo Yado, the usual hotel of the Jojin, ordinary people. Ate, drank, smoked. Ate, drank, smoked, I think should be, again. Distance from Nihonbashi, 12 ri. August 23rd, rose at 4:45, breakfasted, and started a few minutes after 6 for Odawara, where we arrived about 10 and put up in a hotel on the right-hand side of the street called Shibaya. Distance 8 ri, crossed the Banryu River, which had not much water in it, before getting to Oiso. One branch we crossed by bridges of planks placed over the different streamlets, the other on Rendai, a sort of stretcher carried by 4 coolies who had some difficulty making their way through the turbulent current. The coach forded this branch a little lower down, the bags and cushions being first removed. A little before reaching Umezawa, we came down close to the seashore, which the road raised some 30 feet above high water mark, skirts nearly all the way to Odawara. Here a lovely view burst upon our eyes. A white line of foam marked the edge of the bay, which formed a curve stretching far away to sea on the left. Behind the headland rose the blue and black Hakone Mountains, which terminated far away to seaward in the promontory of Idzu. As we proceeded, we observed the Futago or Twins, south of which the road winds up the pass to Hakone, a little on the left flanked by the mountain called Jigoku north of them. In the hollow next to the right was a cloud-clipped mass, which was probably Fuji, Mount Fuji. Odawara is an ugly town, the chief feature of which is the extreme length of the single thoroughfare which composes it. Most of the houses have no upper story. The castle appears very dilapidated. Our inn is not usually visited by foreigners, and its ignorance of them was manifested by the great civility of the attendants. There is a charming little garden behind, closely walled in, containing a pine, green as the emerald in the centre, a large-leaved oak with trunk disproportionately large for its branches on one side, and a very old wild plum trunk on the other, with but 1 or 2 leafy twigs left. The ground below was filled up with tasteful rockwork. We had some provisions with us in the coach and had a moderate lunch, after which a cigar or a nap as the tastes of each individual suggested. At 11:30, we started on foot, a kago being carried behind for the Baron's, Hübner's accommodation, in case he should feel fatigued. The rain, which had been falling at intervals since the morning, and apparently determined to abstain from further annoyance. As soon as we got out of the town, Adams doffed his coat, and I followed his example soon after. The road for about 2 miles from the tea house is pretty level and easy to walk on, with here and there a bit of rough stone pavement. Just before we got to the bridge, Sammai-bashi, below Yumoto, which carries the road over to the right bank, the rain came on again, and we stopped a minute or two in a wayside hut. On the right-hand side of the bridge going up, a path strikes off to Miyanoshita, the favorite resort of Yokohama people. The road now began to get stony and rather narrow. We passed under a temple hid among the trees on the hillside, whence some Tokugawa rebels were driven out by the loyal forces in 1868. A good part of the village of Yumoto was burnt on the occasion. At Yumoto are the best shops for the ware known by the name of the village, consisting of platters, cabinets, sweetmeat boxes, sword stands, tea boxes made of the various woods which grow in the vicinity. The rain became more and more violent, but we determined to spread on. Spread on, I wonder. I'll continue anyway. I stopped a few minutes to smoke a cheroot at a wayside hut or dechaya. The old woman told me that the rain was attributable to the prayers of the peasants, who, fearing the effects of the drought, had made a pilgrimage a day or two before to the shrine of Gongen-sama at Hakone. Their petitions had been granted in the present case, but it was not certain that they were always equally effectual. In general, if rain was to be the order of things, their prayers were heard, but not otherwise. This hut was 28 cho from Hata, and the road became steeper and steeper. What was particularly vexatious was that after having toiled up an ascent, with the notion that one had made so much towards the total climbing, there came a descent closely following. This was a disappointment, of course. The matter may be looked at in two ways. If the elevation of Hata is constant, then these descents are a waste of power, for if they were thrown into the general ascent, the rise would be more gradual. But if we had them all turned into ascents of the same steepness as those we had to go up, Hata would be so much the more troublesome to reach. A second bridge, Sugumo-bashi, below which is a delicious-looking deep pool, carried the road across to the left side of the valley again, passed through a village which is called Kawabata, some 12 cho from Hata. Here were also Yumoto Saiku shops. A shikuyakunin appeared at the further end and informed he was sent to escort our party. As I was slightly in advance of the rest, I replied that I did not require his services, and he said he would take the liberty of withdrawing if I would be so good as to certify to the fact of his having duly put in an appearance, a petition easily granted. Arrived at Hata 3 ri from Odawara at 2:30 in pouring rain, which continued all the afternoon and evening. Our inn is Miyogaya, as the damsels who wait on us pronounce it. Miyoga appears to be a kind of onion which grows in these parts. The meibutsu, or special productions of Hata, are zoni, soup containing rice cakes, and abekawa mochi. Delightful artificial garden at the back of inn, with rockwork, trees, cascades, and a pond full of carp. At nightfall, these fish are enticed into an artificial cave by the united clapping of hands of all the damsels, who thereupon shut them in with a trapdoor inserted in the stone, which looks like the chink of a missionary box. Great glee of the maids at having successfully sold the carp. August 24th. The rain having continued ruthlessly, we spent the whole day at Hata. The morning was occupied in trying tops and purchasing them and other wares. Some of the brinjal-shaped tops in the nests were capital. I bought a quantity for the children at home and a large cabinet covered with bark. The fish were sent into their cave, as usual, by the clapping of hands, and I was informed that the kawasu frog is feared lest it should eat them. Last year, 2 large carp thus fell a prey. No small ones are ever reared, as the violence of the current washes the spawn away. In the afternoon, the weather partially cleared and we explored the garden. The view over the thatched roof to the cedar-clad hills on the right side of the port is lovely. We had delicious freshwater fish called ai, taken at Yumoto, for dinner. The little waiting girls, called Naka, Kin, and Sen, are very agaçante. I finished Greg's Creed of Christendom, which requires to have a Bible constantly by the side for reference. We ate the other meibutsu of Hata, called zoni. The Banryu-gawa is said to be flooded since yesterday. August 25th. Started from Hata at 8 o'clock on foot. The road became steep soon after leaving. Here and there were glimpses towards Odawara, with a small bit of sea on the right of the opening. About 20 cho up the pass came to a level bit, whereon stood a wayside shed, in which a merry white-toothed maiden dispensed a kind of posset called amazake, and cold water to the passers-by. On one side, a bare mountain covered with long grass, and opposite a hill covered with trees, not high, but lofty enough to shut out the other twin. From this 8 cho, more or less, difficult ascent, and then down again, till at last a sudden turn in the road brought us to a charming glimpse of a little bay in the lake, with a red Shinto arch in the foreground and a Cryptomeria avenue on the left leading down to Hakone. White mist veiled all the cedar-clad hills. Halfway along the avenue, we came again on the edge of the lake, where stands a bronze image of Buddha, which has lost 2/3 of its glory. At the end of the avenue, we came to the spot where the barrier in former times stood, the buildings of which in dilapidated condition still remain. Then past the charred remains of some houses burnt in February last into the broad street which forms the village of Hakone. Here we were escorted by a Shukuyakunin, posting station official, to one of the 6 honjin approved inns kept by Koma Sagoyemon, where we took up our quarters at 20 minutes past 10. Adams and I at once took a bath in the lake which washes the steps at the bottom of the inn garden. The mists almost concealed the lake and the upper parts of the mountains on either side from view. In the afternoon, we walked nearly to the top of the pass towards Mishima, but desisted at last because of the mist, which hid everything but the road from our eyes. At dinner, we had a large carp caught in the lake, the flesh of which was very rich and oily. Salmon trout, masu, and akahara are also found in the lake. August 26th. Continued wind and mist, clearing away at times and then descending again, but never discovering the tops of the hills. After tiffin, light lunch, walked to the shrine formerly known as Hakone Gongen, distance about a mile from our inn. It was previous to the restoration one of those mixed Buddhist and Shinto establishments which have since been reformed. Halfway up the hill is a ruinous Buddhist temple from which the images and furniture have been removed. Up a flight of steps to the right, bordered by tall cryptomerias at regular intervals, is the Shinto shrine dedicated to Hiko Hoho Demi no Mikoto, Amatsu Ninigi no Mikoto, and Konohama Sakuya Hime no Mikoto. The building is evidently very old, roof covered with copper tiles, veranda round front and sides, inside a wooden floor running round the mats. Votive offerings hung all round, amongst which a very good picture of the 7 gods of good fortune, the Shichi Fukujin, as we say, with their attributes. Bishamon and Benten-sama were not in the picture, which suggested the theory that they had eloped together. Behind this hall was a descent by several steps into a matted chamber some 12 feet square, 3 mirrors, 1 large in the middle, and 2 smaller right and left, each flanked by 2 gohei, sticks with cut white paper. Behind these cupboards, in which the attendant assured us were wooden images of the 3 gods, or rather gods and goddess, which are, however, never shown to the public. Right and left of the main shrine were 2 other smaller ones. Halfway down the steps, the shrine of Soga no Jiro, who with his brother Goro slew the murderer of their father, a legend belonging to Yoritomo's time. We were shown the swords and scabbards carried by these 2 heroes in battle, very rusty blades, scabbards made of bamboo and brass plates bound with copper bands. The tachi-ashi in chased bronze, very good, as well as the band round the wakizashi, the dirk or short sword, with which the murderer was stabbed in the throat. Todome sashita, as they say, or put a stop to. August 27th. Rain fell during the whole of the night and up to 10 o'clock this morning. In the afternoon, the weather had cleared up so much that we were able to start on a boating excursion to the other end of the lake. Its length is about 7 miles and 2.5 in the broadest part. Round a point at the other end, where the hills are lowest, we came to a tunnel dug for about a mile or so through to the other side, by means of which the villages above Mishima are irrigated. The roof of the tunnel appears to be supported by timber. A sluice has been placed a few yards from where the passage commences, which can be raised or lowered by ropes coiled around a roller and passing through 2 great wooden hooks on the outer side of the gates, of which there are 3. Rowed across to the other side, where the grassy hills are low, just to the foot of Komagatake, tree-covered, ascended by a path up the grassy hills of slight rise. Beautiful view of Fuji, Mount Fuji, over the hills. Otomi Toge, mountain pass, leading from the Miyanoshita Valley over to Subashiri, entered a wood and came shortly to Ubago, where are hot baths used by persons afflicted with eye disease. Some of the water came down the hill in narrow wooden troughs, and other dribbled from the rocks into a basin. The temperature of this last was very high. Procured a guide, old and blear-eyed, to take us to Ashino-yu. Ubago is 20 minutes' walk from the shore. Baron von Hübner had gone back in the boat, continued to ascend through the wood for 20 minutes more, and came out on the shoulder of Jigokuyama, or Hell Mountain, a most appropriate name. The soil here, denuded of trees and covered with rough stones, seemed to consist of calcined granite, with a large quantity of sulfur in it. The mud which issues from certain points where a stinking stream is given forth is formed into large bricks and carried down to Ubago, where it is refined in large iron boilers. There were 1 or 2 straw huts for labourers. We descended the rough sides of the ravine for a considerable distance, picking our way over the stones with difficulty, for they were very slippery. No path apparently, but our guide knew his way well, for he brought us in the end to a path distinctly marked through the woods which skirt the mountain. We passed along at a giddy height, holding on like flies. At last the path issued onto the slopes covered with long, coarse grass. Far below us ran the stream, which issues from the lake and passes by Miyanoshita to Yumoto, and on the shoulder of the opposite range of hills we perceived the path from Sengokubara to Miyanoshita. We descended gradually for several miles, now through grass and now through thickets, till at last our guide took a sharp turn to the right, up a path which ended at Ashino-yu. Part of this path was very steep and part very level. It ascended between 2 grassy hills. Near the top we met the Miyanoshita and Hata paths. Ashino-yu was reached, a wretched place, at 6:45. Hotel for foreigners, on which the words sulphur baths were hung on a board. It lies just between Futago and Komagatake. The road ascended a little and then became very good, past a deep-looking tarn. Above it, a great jizo-son cut in the rock. Descended rapidly the grassy skirts of Futago, past another tarn on the left, entered a wood, very steep and muddy path, issued on to Tokaido a little way above the Shinto arch, leading to Gongen-sama at 7:15. Very dark now, and slippery stones, pounded on and reached hotel at 7:37. A little rain on the way just before reaching Ashino-yu. Horribly tired. Japanese estimate of distance walked 4 ri, I should say at least 10 miles. Walked it in 3 hours 37 minutes, sometimes going as fast as we could. August 28th, rain all the morning, which cleared up a little after midday. Adams and I climbed the path which leads from the end of the village up the hills to Atami, and from the elevation above the tarn, out of which issues the stream down past Hata to Odawara. Had a splendid view of the Bay of Suruga, with Numazu and Mishima in front of us. The Nirayama Ken, most mountainous, spreading away to the left. On the right, Fuji, cloud-capped, and Ashidakayama. We stood watching the mists as they concealed or discovered the unmatched, that's Fujisan, for some minutes, the peerless one, and then descended to the post at the top of Hakone Pass, inscribed with Kore Yori Higashi Odawara Han Shihai Sho. From this point on is under the control of the Higashi Odawara clan, or Han. We then ascended the hill on the other side by a path which we imagined would give us a good view of Fuji, but were entirely disappointed. We got to a point from which we could see the Shinto arch of Gongen-sama on the shore of the lake. It was now 4:30. Adams turned back, and I proceeded with the intention of walking on another half hour and of trying to climb the point which at our Honjin hides Fuji from sight. But instead of the path going thither, it turned away from the lake and led down, through steep grass and puddles, never ending. Sano was of the opinion that we should get out onto the Tokaido at Fujimidai below Nakayama. On we went, always descending, till it became evident that we had a deep wooded ravine between us and the Tokaido, while the distance we had come made me very reluctant to return. I elected, therefore, to push on to Mishima, which seemed close underneath. But the way proved longer than I had ever dreamt of. Sometimes we almost lost the path, which was hidden in tall wet grass as high as my head. My boots became soaked, and my trousers, which I had turned over my knees, also wet through. We made several attempts to profit by short cuts, which in the end turned out to be roundabout ways. On our right, Ashidakayama and Fuji in the clouds. Ahead, the sea and Fujikawa. On our left, Mishima. The descent became very gradual. We were on a spur of the Hakone range, which seemed lengthened to infinity. At last we came to a path on our left, which descended rapidly, and following it down, we came to a farmhouse on the bank of a stream. Here we were put in the way to Mishima, which we reached in half an hour, going at a very quick rate along the level. Everybody we met said it was Hammichi, half a ri in distance, i.e. just under 2 kilometers, to our destination, wherever it chanced to be. At last we crossed a bridge over the large stream and were told that we had only 8 cho to go. On the Sispontine, that's the north side of the stream, it had been Hammichi continually. We got into Mishima a little south of the Mishima Myojin shrine and went to a hotel called Kojiya. In the streets were pine fires burning before each house to guide the departed spirits back, for Bon Festival is close at hand. Reached Mishima at 7:05 and started in Kago, that's a palanquin, at 8:20. The bearers were very stubborn and difficult to start. A little way out of the town, they discovered that they were short of 10 tempos and put us down in the middle of the road to discuss whether they should go on or take us back. At last, they decided to take us on, seeing that we were not responsible for the defalcation. Here, a bamboo torch was lit, called Taimatsu, and carried ahead to light the footsteps of the bearers. The road is pretty level until Ichinomiya. At Mitsuya, I bought a pair of waraji, straw sandals, which were a great deal too small, and walked in them to Sasawara, where the rain forced me into my kago again. Reached Yamanaka about 11:15, a ri and 12 cho from Hakone. Between Nakayama, is that in Yamanaka, and the first Tateba resting post, met Noda, Inoue, and some people from the Honjin Inn who had come to look for me. Rain ceased and nearly full moon shone brightly. At the top of the pass by 1 a.m. Descent quick in spite of the badness of the road to Hakone, and in half an hour, very tired. August 29th, started a few minutes after noon for Atami by a circuitous route, sending Noda with the baggage and servants direct by the road over the mountains. As we passed through the village, we saw in one of the inns 5 or 6 cages containing prisoners who were said to be on their way back to the prison at Yedo, whence they had escaped some time back. The cages were like large hencoops of bamboo, with wooden floors and a pole through the top for carrying, like any ordinary kago. I walked on ahead of the others, who were in shuk kago, and halfway up the pass fell in with 2 tamba merchants of Kashiwabara, who had a small boy with them. One had been 17 years in Yedo without once visiting his native place. They talked of many things which I should have thought beyond their circle of interests, such as the Franco-Prussian War, the American expedition to Korea, and desired to visit London and Washington. Evidently, they had been reading the new journal, Shimbun Zashi. One said he had heard that Kyoto was to be open to foreign trade, which accords with what Okuma told me last time I saw him. That would be Okuma Shigenobu. A little below the top, we came to a tateba from which there is a fine view towards Nirayama and Numazu, with the sea and the province of Idzu, much the same view as that which Adams and I had enjoyed yesterday. Izu. Karuizawa, by which we were to pass, was pointed out lying in a hollow among the hills and separated from us by round-backed grassy moors with ravines between them. A little above Yamanaka, we turned down a path to the left through the long grass to the bank of a stream, which had to be crossed by stepping stones. I got on ahead of the kagos, as was inevitable, and had to trust to my knowledge of the direction in which Karuizawa lay to find the path. At times, it quite disappeared in the breast-high grass, but there was generally an appearance of curling over of its, and then there's a footnote, which I added. That's Sato's handwriting there. Shimbun Sashi. Right. So sorry, and go back to an appearance of curling over of its tops from either side and meeting in the center, which afforded a sufficient indication. I toiled on and on, almost stifled by the heat of these close valleys, until the road took a turn which eventually led down to Mishima. So I retraced my steps, climbed a hill where the grass had been cut for fodder, and discovered not far ahead some houses lying in the hollow, which turned out to be the village of Tashiro. On this hill I found growing among the roots of the grass without any apparent stalk, and sometimes in bunches of 2, an apple-like fruit of the size of a wild crab and is extremely astringent, sour. This I learnt afterwards is called shidome and jinashi, or earth pear. The Japanese eat it preserved in salt. Walking straight down the hill, I at last struck into a path which led through a wood down to the level bottom of the valley, then through the paddy fields, jumping various streams to Tashiro, whence I inquired my way to Karuizawa. This small village, consisting of a couple of dozen cottages, a temple, and the Nanushis, that's the village headman's house, is situated in a dell, just at the foot of the pass. To the people of the place, it is the pass, and no other name exists for it. No foreigner had passed before, and my hat, boots, clothing, cheroots, pocket knife, pencil case, etc., were objects of wonder to the whole population. I arrived at 3:10, and after waiting an hour in a Yasumi Dokuro, was starting when Ezawa caught me up and said the party was coming. They had also been astray, misled by the kago bearers. When they arrived, we all went to the Nanushi, or village mayor's house, a very neat building, enclosed in front with a hedge of very tall laurels. I had a chazuke, or rice and tea, served up by the mayor's son. Fresh kagos, palanquins, and bearers. Left at 4:45, I was in advance as usual. Path winding and steep for 12 cho through a wood, marked by stones at intervals, leading to a shrine on the summit. Reached the top, 14 cho at 5:15, descent through a wood at first, and then long grass for the greater part of the way. Road rough and muddy. Much further down than up. It took me 2 hours quick walking from Karuizawa to the inn at Atami. Hotel Watanabe, the other Imai, where the hot spring is, being full. The hot water rushes forth with violence 3 times during the day and the same during the night. Rain ever increasing from top of pass. Joined Hakone path at entrance to village. Whole distance from Hakone 6 ri. Some of them at least 50 cho instead of 36. Delicious hot bath on arriving. Hour of arrival 6:45. Cook a great comfort. August 30th. Left Atami in 2 boats at 8:45. Passed the point beyond which lies Yoshihama in 2 hours and then struck across the bay in the direction of Enoshima. The sun became very hot in the afternoon after having been obscured the greater part of the morning. Passed Odawara at such a distance that it could only just be distinguished. The boatmen discovered a small shark a long way ahead, moving slowly along the surface of the water and evidently enjoying the sun. Our boat went in pursuit, javelin head fixed with a line attached onto one end of the mainsail yard. As we go near, however, the fish turned his head around a quarter of a circle and dodged us. It was no good pursuing him after he had become aware of his danger, so we proceeded on the voyage. About sundown, a breeze began to spring up, sails hoisted, one main and one in the bow. Past the curious rock which Adam says is called Eboshi and the boatmen name Ubajima. It might be either the first from its shape, formal headwear for court nobles, or the second from its having a little rock close by. Reached Enoshima long after dark, about 11 hours after leaving Atami Island, quite surrounded by water through which people were wading to the shore near Katase. Carried ashore on boatmen's backs to the landing place under the Torii Gate, Shrine Gate. Quarters in dirty hotel called Tachibanaya, all the others being full of pilgrims. Did not sleep till past 3, so read Rousseau's Confessions, which in places are very filthy. August 31st. Landed from a coolie's back on the isthmus, the tide being a good way out at 7:05 by my watch. So he was carried over by a Japanese coolie servant. Walked to the bridge at Fujisawa by 8:05. Ordered jinriksha, that's a rickshaw, for self, Sano, and Kojiro, and ate a chazuke, tea with rice. Left at 8:55. Road stony and springs of jinriksha very bad. Much jolted and bruised in consequence. 2 ri to Totsuka by 10:25. Rested at tea house called Omotaka and left at 10:42. Several hills to climb and walked as far as Sakaigi, boundary of Musashi and Sagami provinces. Number of Matsu Pinasta blown down, rotten at the core by the storm on the 23rd. At Hodogaya by 12:30, started to walk at once and got to Tamagawa Inn on the hill at Kanagawa by 1:05. Had a Japanese meal with some sake and smoked quite a number of cheroots in waiting for Sutherland's coach, which did not turn up till past 3. Arrived in Yedo about 6. Great changes have taken place in our absence. All the Han, that's the clans, have been turned into ken, that's prefectures. This is the Haihan chicken. Sawa had been replaced at the Foreign Office by Iwakura. Okuma has been reappointed Sangi, and Itagaki of Tosa added to the number. Inoue Bunda made Mimbu Taiyu. Other changes are in prospect, no doubt. The whole of the daimyos dismissed from the office of Chiji of Han, the Daisangi and others remain as they were for the present. September the 1st. Miyamoto Koichi of the Foreign Office says he believes the small clans will be gathered up into large ken, prefectures. Sawa will perhaps have one. September 3rd. Sawa and his son dined at the legation. 5th of September, Matsune and his wife dined. 6th of September, Saigo Kichinosuke, Saigo Takamori died. September 8th, great dispute about the value at which the Shosha kinsatsu are to be taken at Yokohama. Dubusuke and myself all the afternoon at Foreign Office against Terashima and Yamaguchi, trying to induce them to allow the amounts in dispute to be paid into the consulates pending settlement. Visit in the morning from Kyoto official Dr. Murayama Koyo, dressed in a red haori, short coat for formal kimono, with thick silk cords at the tamoto, sleeves. Old, toothless, nearly bald, a great friend of Iwakura and other kuges, court nobles. evidently acquainted with contemporary history. September 9th, dined with Sawa in company with Adams and Baron Hübner. Miyamoto and Kondo, Sawa's headman and clerk at the Foreign Office, joined us at table. Painting in watercolors before and after by a female servant, a male retainer, and Sawa himself. Time occupied in each hasty sketch 3 to 5 minutes. Music on harp, lute, violin, and flageolet by 4 blind men. Young Sawa's wife also performed on harp, but showed not her face. That is the illustration at the front of the book. Depicts this scene, I think. September the 11th. Dined with Adams and B. Hübner, Baron Hübner, at Iwakura's. Very interesting conversation. Surprise expressed by Adams at change of Han into Ken. Explanation, the Japanese principles of Taigi and Meibun, which can only be translated by Loyauté. Afraid that foreigners think all Japanese liars. Old government forced to tell lies. Mikado's government not. Desire to cement closely friendly relations and consolidate government. The Chiji, governors of Satsuma Choshu Tosa, Sachoto, certainly not to be reappointed, would render the late change totally ineffectual. Baron de Hübner advised him always to keep on good terms with the British. Hübner remained there talking till a little before midnight. We had previously spent the afternoon in discussing whether the Nibu and Nibusatsu should continue to be taken at 2 boos at hereafter or at the rate of 202 for 311 boos. September 12th, same subject discussed all the afternoon. I think the Japanese have right on their side, and if they gave a month's notice, no loss could accrue to foreigners. Simply, they would no longer be able to pay 10 ryo of duties with what they buy for 7 ryo or less. Present, the ministers of France, Holland, Italy, Spain, Adams, Iwakura, Terashima, and Okuma. Also, Mr. Yoshida Taro, who held his peace the whole time. He kept quiet the whole time. Nothing settled. Dinner at Legation, Outre, Count Fedostiani, and Dubusque, besides ourselves. September 14th. Finished the 3rd conference on the Nibu question, the payment of duties, at 5 o'clock. Finally agreed to go on till January the 1st. Reported from Takenoichi that the Fukuoka troops are to be disbanded. Arisugawa no Miya, the new Chiji, governor, has arrived there 20 days ago. Tsumagi Tsutomu, the ex-Metsuke of the shogunate and now a Shizuoka samurai, appointed Godai Sanji of Nagoya. Akita has confessed to having forged kinsatsu. He and the Chiji of Kurume and Hiroshima are said not to have been relieved of their functions yet, being still under trial for forgery. Tsuda of Wakayama appointed. Okura, Shoyu, and Hamaguchi of the same clan appointed chief of the ports. It is said that the Mimbusho has been abolished and its duties divided between the Shihosho, Ministry of Justice, and the Okura-sho, Finance Ministry. The Daisanjis of Koromo, old name of Toyota City, a little clan of 20,000 koku in Mikawa, now the eastern part of Aichi Prefecture, have begged that their ken, their prefecture, may be abolished and themselves allowed to retire. They propose to give titles, deeds to the Shizoku and Sotsu to be redeemed in 7 years instead of pay as heretofore, and to cancel their debts of 90,000 ryo in 10 or 20 years. September the 15th, Baron Hübner, Adams and I to Yaozen, a ryoriya, a restaurant in Sumicho, far beyond Asakusa. Not a nice place for the view, but celebrated for cookery. It is always much better to be on the riverside. Geisha were Tsurukichi with a fine nose but projecting teeth and a grimace on her lips. Yako, very fat cheeks but white skin, a hand on which the blue veins could be traced with ease. Ohae, with nothing much to recommend her but a certain amount of liveliness and a neat cut face. Kotake, flat-nosed and pockmarked. Omocha, the fat, ugly shakutori, server of alcohol, and Suzuhachi, rather pretty and modest. The latter gave us a dance to the verses called Gosho Guruma. The song, which is all the go now, is Shogaina. Here is a specimen. Basha ya joki ja tayori ga osoi, kakete okita ya telegrafu, jinriksha ja abunai kega bakkari shoganai. Or, communication by carriage or steamer is slow. I should like to run by telegraph. The bath chair is dangerous. Nothing but hurts and spills. Shogaina. Shogaina probably means it can't be helped, I think. Returned by boat to Shiodome and carriage to Legation in 2 hours and a half. September 16th, private audience on Baron de Hübner's account at the Takimi Cascade View Pavilion in the Fukiage Gardens. His Majesty looked more intelligent on this occasion, and in addressing a few mumbled words to Adams and the Baron, looked at them with an almost friendly expression. Decidedly, he is improving. The Baron said in his speech that from his youth up he had desired to visit the Empire of the Rising Sun, which I simply translated Nihon Koku. The speeches were prepared beforehand as usual. Itagaki, the new Sangi from Tosa, was present. Okuma, Kido, Sanjo, Iwakura, Terashima, and Bojo late a Chuban. Many fine cakes were put before us and sent to the legation afterwards in a nagamochi of great size. The streets were lined with some shabby-looking troops as far as the castle, and then we came to the Shinpei, or imperial troops, which Mr. Motono tells me have been amalgamated. September 17th, Kido, that's Kido Koino Takayoshi, dined with us. Says the government will probably give the samurai tegata or rokken for 2/3 of their present roku, let the other 1/3 accumulate in the coffers of the government till there is sufficient to buy up all the scrip or to pay the interest without any trouble. Daimyo's paper money, after deducting the sums deposited in treasuries against them and taking them at the price of the day, will only be 30 million ryo. Does not feel afraid of Shimazu Saburo of Satsuma, the daimyo of Satsuma. No daimyos will as yet be appointed Chiji of Ken, governors of prefectures, but things will go on as hitherto under the superintendence of the Sanji. September 18th, visit from Taki Noichi of Kishu. Pretends to take a gloomy view of politics and hopes nothing bad will come of all this. Very shocking to see this loyalty of the retainer to his prince dying away, but loyalty to the Mikado, the emperor, must override it. Wants to reform the position of women in Japan, make them wear skirts and tight sleeves like European women, no hairpins, and tie their hair behind in a knot like the Kyoto ladies. September 19th, visit from Yamada Keigo of Taishu. He says that a project is on foot for abolishing the use of Chinese characters and using only kana. To commence with the elementary schools and gradually work upwards, to translate the classics into kana and form an Iroha dictionary in which the Chinese origin of the Sinico-Japanese words will be shown. Also to enact that ra shall in future be the sign of the plural. Narita of Obama came in the afternoon. Edie has withdrawn his application for leave to go to Obama and left us in the lurch. He most positively promised to go, and everything that can bind a man's conscience had been done by him. Simply he had not signed the contract. I have put it all on the Admiral, who says in his letter that he does not think the government would grant leave for the purpose. In the meantime, all the Obama pupils have gone back in the expectation of getting a teacher, and Narita is very desirous not to disappoint them. I have promised to try and find one for them. Hanabusa of the Foreign Office, a Bizen man, came with a book derived from our Foreign Office list and the American Foreign Office rules. A great many mistakes had been made in the translation. The translator thought orders meant meirei, and that MS was an abbreviation for minister. I gave him a copy of Whitaker's Almanac for 1870. September 26th, Edie, having disappointed the Obama people, I have had to content myself with introducing to them Mr. Van den Broek, a Dutchman. Narita says that one day all the Sanji refused to go to court, that 11 of the highest officers sent in their resignations. Saigo and Kido are said not to get on together, the latter wishing to proceed too fast. As to fundamentals, however, they are agreed. September 27th, Narita sent letters this morning to Ono Kaizo and Ohara Gonsaburo, my teacher, and Shitsuji, steward, to say that on returning home last night, told his people that he had almost concluded an arrangement with a teacher, whereupon the Daisanji replied that the affair bore another aspect since the change of Han into Ken, clans into prefecture, or domains into prefectures, that he could not tell how affairs were going there and must refer to Obama, and wants to delay making an agreement till the end of this Japanese month, about October the 15th. As Narita had been repeatedly pestering me to get a teacher up until today, and yesterday had almost concluded the bargain, and moreover wrote that he was sick instead of coming to see me, I conjectured that the proposal of a delay was merely a softening down of a breaking off the negotiation which must come in the end. I replied that I could not ask Mr. V to wait, and that I was astonished at such a request being made after the urgency which had been manifested up to yesterday. The messenger wished to see me, but I refused, on which he said the only course which remained was to break off the negotiation and write down to Obama to say so. I was content and wrote an apology to Mr. V for having disappointed him. Matsune came to see me. He says Saigo does everything Kido tells him. Ito is one of the planners of the reforms, but has gone to Osaka, that's Ito Hirobumi, I think, in order that it may not be believed to have come from him. Aizumen, Hirozawa, Tomijiro, Nagaoka, and Yamada Teisuke came to see me. the last I had not seen since the beginning of 1867 at Osaka. They say the reforms will not be met with any opposition from them, invited me to Asawagi, a noisy party perhaps, on October the 1st. Yamakawa is the name of Dubusuke's Aizu friend who frightened poor Higashikuze. September 30th. Narita is very anxious to make it up, wanted to invite V and myself to a Japanese feast somewhere or other, but I declined. Ono tells me he is coming the day after tomorrow to make his apology. Finished translation of the new essay on the feudal system, Shin Hokenron, published by Kido's semi-official organ, which I began 10 days ago. A tough bit of work, filling 10 closed sheets. October the 1st, to Hirase restaurant in Fukagaya with Hirosawa Tomijiro, Nagaoka, and Yamada Teisuke of Aizu from the Funaya Doya Yamazakiya by Shiodome. Saizo geisha, who was of the party last time I went with Aizu men, went with us. Fukagawa geisha were Oyasu, Kohana, and Osen, with a shakutori, sakepura, named Ofuta. The latter danced very well and performed a piece called Gonsuke, full of excellent mimicry. We played a little at Bait the Bear and a great deal at Onigokko, or blind man's buff. There were generally 2 blinded at once. Got home about 9. At Hirase are chairs and tables, altogether an excellent house of entertainment. Hirase, sorry. October the 2nd, Narita came to make his apology for breaking off negotiations with Van den Broek. I was not hard on him, but pointed out the strangely suspicious appearance which his previous urgency gave to his subsequent proposal to wait. Besides, Namikata had expressly said in reply to an inquiry of mine that the change of Han into Ken would make no difference. It seems that letters arrived the same evening from Obama, or the next morning, to say that the clans of Tamba had proposed to Obama to join in petitioning to be made into one single Ken, or prefecture. The Daisanji and the rest had judged it necessary to refer again to Obama before concluding the agreement. Narita protested his innocence of anything like deceit in the matter, and we made it up again. October the 4th, Murayama-sensei came to ask me what I thought of his Kokoro no Dakkenron. I praised it and suggested publishing it in the Shimbun Zashi, to which he agreed with delight. We talked of the modern history of Japan. He says that Ryohin, a priest of Toei-zan, friend of Satsuma men Def Kawakami Naoe and ditto Naosuke, with letter to Adams from Willis. Conversation pen in hand of Mito, suspected of complicity in attack on Ando. Money of the bakufu which Ando was to have lent to Mito, but afterwards refused, having been persuaded by his own karo, retainer, that the priest was asking for it simply to reimburse the money he had before lent to Mito. Ando was accused by the Mito people of receiving bribes from the English and other nations, and was considered a heartless rascal to be rolling in wealth, and to refuse this loan. Hai's men joined them to avenge the death of Oribe no Kami, who, indignant that his remonstrances against the loan of Hamagoten had not been listened to, disemboweled himself. Head of Kama no Kami, carried off to Kyoto by someone who is now high in the Mikado's government, Kido, maybe, has never been found, was not exposed at Kyoto. Choshu evidently had to do with that affair. Story of Okimachi Sanjo, when tenso about the armistice granted to Choshu. Murayama could not understand Kyuhei, as it is generally granted by the victorious party. Lands of Bakufu usually put at 8 million koku, but 18 million more of confiscated lands between Keicho and Kuanye. The Mikado went to call yesterday on Sanjo and Iwakura without giving them notice, and then to Hamagoten. He has announced his intention of attending his council's deliberations in future, has had the hair of his pages cut short. Quite a lot in there that I don't follow, but perhaps somebody reading this will. October the 5th, lame letter of excuses from Edie. He could easily have saved me and Adams a great deal of trouble by writing his intention of withdrawing to me at the same time that he withdrew his request for leave. He deserves a stinger in reply. October 6th, went to call on Kido. Conversation about the changes in the government. No parliament, but a council to be nominated by the Mikado. The latter entertained Sanjo, Iwakura, Kido, Okubo, and others at a dinner in European style on the occasion of his visit the other day to Hamagoten. Drank beer and wine himself. He went without giving notice, and I and S were sent for to the castle in a great hurry. Kido seems to be a moderate reformer, is only for applying European institutions where they accord with the Japanese spirit and the point of progress attained. October 9th, young Chinese scholar, son of Daisanji of Amagasaki, named Hattori Kinju, anxious to study European learning in the proper way, lives at temple called Shinkoin in Akabane, recommends a book on grade writing called, what's that? Soseki, I think? I'm not sure. Sogyo? An impertinent young wretch who finished by asking me if I had a mekake, a mistress. October 15th, invited to Yumeiro on bank of river beyond Asakusa, where I had a feast with Willis, Wergman, and the Satsuma men in 1868 by the Tottori people. Present, Kitagaki Oki Daisanji, Kawasaki Sametane Godai Sanji, and one Ashizu, who looked like a student. Geishas, my old friend Saizo of Shimbashi, Somekichi of Yanagibashi, besides Kikuji, Kosen, Odzu, Miyakichi, Kanekichi, beautiful, Sokuhei, and Hamazo. Much sake drunk out of a large glass made in imitation of a silver goblet gilt inside. Exhibition by people in the street of a rustic dance called Ise Ondo. Shaven, pockmarked man, great fun, and balancing feats by a juggler. October 17th, visit from Numata Torasaburo with a message to arrange call from his ex-prince. October 18th, visit of ex-prince of Awa, Hachisuka, Akizuki, Ukunosuke, Sengoku Sanuki no Kami, Tani Daisanji of Hikone, with whom Takehito is living, Eto Shinpei, now vice president of the council, a rather nice Hizen man, and a fat big fellow named Ikuta. They wanted to know about titles, orders, and medals. I gave them all the information I possessed. Great delight with letter clips, legs, Chinese classics, and my copy of Kanji, bound in 4 volumes. All the 3 ex-daimyos had their haircut in European style. Tani, Hachisuka, and the fat man in Japanese clothes, the others in European clothes of their own tailor's make. Murayama sensei came for a few moments. His hobby is proving that in ancient times there was no idea of barbarian expelling. Oh, that would be joy, I suppose. He told Ono that the Mikado wanted to cut his hair short, but the Ni no Tsubone persuaded him to wait a bit. In a couple of years, says M, he will probably visit Europe. October 19th, Okada Hajime Daisanji of Fukuyama, Narita in the afternoon. Geishas from Yanagibashi, Somekichi, Kikuju, and blank. We also had Koito, old friend of Tatsu at Takayashiki, and Komatsu of this neighborhood. Lawrence with me. All sorts of games and dances, especially the Kankan, the Ise Ando, and a Chaban Kyogen, or extempore fast, by Somekichi and Kikuju. Ise Ando or Ondo, I'm not sure. October 22nd, Oki, Kitagaki of Inshu, and the Daisanji Matsuda Masa of Kyoto Fu, also of the same clan, very intelligent, came to pay a visit. They were to have brought their daimyo, but fortunately could not. October 23rd, Awa Komuro, a second-class councillor of the same clan, and Nishikawa, a former retainer of Iwakura, came to see me. They spoke about Sameshima's non-reception in England. I explained the reasons, adding that the English government naturally felt that a doctor's son was hardly the person to send to England when the Minister of Finance and a kuge, court noble, were sent to China. Went to call on and breakfast with Iwakura by invitation. That's Iwakura Tomomi. He spoke about affairs a little. The change of Han domains into Ken prefecture had not at first seemed possible for 5 or 6 years at least, but events had worked in such a way that the government thought they had better take advantage of the tide at the flood. They had expected bloodshed, of course, but had been agreeably disappointed. There had been a little disturbance in Geishu, but he believed it was over. Kurume, of course, was discontented, and there was also some dissatisfaction in Satsuma. Osumi no Kei and Saigo were, however, Osumi no Kami, I suppose, and Saigo were, however, unanimous as to the necessity of concentrating the power in one place, and Ijichi Shoji is working well. Some of the Satsuma men had thought Keiki and Aizu too leniently dealt with. Keiki is Yoshinobu, the last shogun, and Aizu is the Aizu domain, and suspected the party which was in favor of mildness were sympathizers with the ex-shogunate, whence the report of underhand dealings with Shizuoka. He also said that Sir Harry Park's violent demeanor often damaged the effect of the sincere and friendly advice he offered to them. It was alleged that people took his advice because he bullied them into it. His passionate behavior was a great misfortune. It was certain that he had their interests at heart if he could only restrain his temper. This is by no means the first time I have heard such remarks. Iwakura, while apologizing for speaking in a depreciating tone of my chief, expressed himself very distinctly on this point. He found Sir Harry more considerate of their interests than the French minister Outre, who with all his blandness was very obstinate. Iwakura also asked me a great many questions, which I judge were intended as soundings as to my willingness to enter their service. I may be wrong, but at all events, the notion that this was so made me give him answers that must have destroyed any hopes of my accepting such an offer. October 30th. Okuma, Goto, and Ito dined at the legation. Very little political talk. Ito was at my house before dinner. He says that his ex-prince was sole author of his memorial in number 8 of the Budget of News, also that the new essay on the feudal system, Shin Hokenron, was inspired by Kido. October 31st, went to visit old Murayama at Negishi. Old garden full of stones, fern, moss, stumps, and wells. House a mere hut covered with shingles. Room small, crammed with books and all sorts of Chinese articles. A wonderful short-legged chair, beautiful handmaiden with her hair cut short and gathered up into a knot behind, most becoming. Says the causes of Keiki's downfall, Yoshinobu's downfall, at last were his offering to resign the shogunate in the hope his resignation would not be accepted, then offending Kaga by not going to meet him when he came up to Kyoto at the end of 1867 in answer to Keiki's summons to the daimyos. Takashima Shirotayu, Nagasaki interpreter, was imprisoned for teaching Dutch, was begged for by Egawa Tarozaemon, 1801 to 1855, and taught the latter the use of European weapons and drill, died about the time Perry came, or shortly after. So that will be 1853-4. November the 2nd, Adams called on Iwakura, spoke about the case of coal at Hakodate, also about the revision of the treaties and a project for sending an embassy to Europe to explain Japanese affairs. Adams said he thought it much to be regretted that the time was so near. I said that the government wished to go as far as possible, but they could not do everything, and they wanted to send an embassy to Europe to explain that. November 3rd, dinner with Narita Takehisa, Lawrence, Wergman, Ono, Ohara at Hirase in Fukagawa. Geishas, Otake with a lovely complexion and Kokin who drank quantities of sake, cup in form of a pipe with twisted stem. November 4th, Mikado's birthday, salutes fired 3 times. Review of troops ranged round the moat from Tatsunokichi to Hibiya and from Sakurada to Hanzo gates, Hanzomon. Dinner at Sakuradamon and Hanzomon. Dinner at Enryokuan, building for drawing to from afar, to foreign representatives. DeLong absent, Sanjo, Iwakura, Kido, Okuma, Terashima, Yamaguchi, and Ishibashi. 3 hours at table, conjurers in the evening, very good. November 5th, races at the Shokonsha by Kudanzaka. Adams, Wergman, and I got seats in Kido's box, where we were joined by the ex-prince of Hizen, his brother and cousin, dressed in shabby European clothes and looking the picture of cretinism, also the ex-prince of Choshu, with his fearfully narrow head and gaping mouth, the ex of Awa, the ex of Kyosuye, the ex of Chofu, the ex of Iwakuni, a little boy. Out of all of them, Choshu was the most lively. Hizen was still in the stage where watches are handed round and compared, was anxious to know if his hat was the correct thing. The racecourse is half a mile round and has a very sharp turn at each end, the consequence being the fall of many a bold jockey. Weather splendid. In the evening, Nakai Kozo and General Notsu to dinner. The former was very amusing and told us a great deal about the Reverend Luke Harris, who used to fall into trances and have spheres, as Nakai put it. November 6th, Sekine, Adams' ex-teacher now at the Foreign Office, came to pray that a good word might be put in for him. He says that the treaty with China is not satisfactory to the government and that Hanabusa was sent off a month ago to summon the embassy back, a draft of the treaty having been received. That the treaty contains something about China and Japan being of one mind for weal or woe. I cannot say what reliance is to be placed on Sekine's statements. Went to see Ohara Shuntaro's chrysanthemums in the afternoon. They were very beautiful, especially one yellow species with delicate golden florets, like a star with a myriad rays. Killed 4 mosquitoes sitting at my desk. November 7th, went to see the chrysanthemums at the gardeners at Tsukushigawa, up the stream past Huskins Cemetery. Very lovely. Bought the first pink camellias in full blossom which I've seen this autumn. The oranges are beginning to be ripe enough to eat. November 10th, visit from Higashi Kuze. November 16th, Iwakura dined. The embassy to Europe is to start December. American mail. Himself, Kido, and Okubo as principal and secondary envoys. We advise that the 2 latter should be denominated counselors of embassy. Yamaguchi, Ito, and several others are going. November 17th, visit from Matsune and his wife with young Sendai, son of Date Munenari, and the image of his father. Adams and I called on Sawa and left a card on Higashi Kuze. The former was offered Morioka Chiji, governorship of Morioka Prefecture, but refused. He wants the Mikado to make a progress into Oshu and Dewa to appoint Chiji governors to all the Ken prefectures at once and make up his mind to the system by which all are to be uniformly governed. November 18th, Matsune Samaku, Gonroku, and wife of the young prince of Sendai dined with us. The latter was dressed in a Norfolk jacket and trousers of his own choosing and reminded me much of the oaf Knox at Madame Labrosse's. At dinner, Adams proposed to me to take 5 days' holiday, as I have felt somewhat seedy of late, and I accepted gratefully. November 19th. I am afraid this is Sunday, but as I am rather like the ass who has fallen into the pit in my present state, and my trip is taken for the purpose of trying to extract him from his perilous position, I think it may be passed over without much censure. Got up early and started at 7:30 in my kago, palanquin, a most comfortable one, lately purchased very cheap, borne by 4 stalwart 6-footers, such as, O'Hara informed me gravely, carry the daimyo's kagos. One would fancy someone had shown him Bergman's caricature of me as the last daimyo in Japan. My train consists of Sano, Soyama, and Kojiro. No beef, bread, or beer. I'm going to live on the food of the country, though I cannot dispense with my European pillow. 1 cheroot after midday meal and 1 after dinner is all I allow myself. Terence, 2 volumes of Balzac, that's Honoré de Balzac, the French author, and a couple of packs of cards to play patience with will be my protection against being bored. I got out of the kago shortly after issuing from the Suidobashi gate of the castle by the aqueduct and walked. The air was keen, but the sky perfectly clear, not a cloud visible anywhere. Turned into some nursery gardeners at Sugamo to see the chrysanthemum shows. In one was an immense gaku, 12 feet long by 6 high, entirely composed of chrysanthemums, with the character Kotobuki written or embroidered on it in pink blossoms. The roots were entirely concealed, and this sort of frame appears to be suspended in the air. There was a group of 2 ladies and a boy whose dresses were entirely formed of maroon blossoms with an edging of yellow marks and hands of painted wood, apparently. Some sort of group in another, same sort of group, sorry, in another. Chotaro, Magohachi, Onokichi, names of the florists, passed through Itabashi about 11 and then through Kami Itabashi, a mere village. The existence of one doesn't notice till one gets to the bridge beyond. We then found from a man who was going the same way that it was a ri to Nerima, the next place where one could, word missing, but I preferred tramping it to going back even a few yards. Reached Nerima at 12, where we had some buckwheat vermicelli. That would be udon, I think. I burned my lips with too much cayenne pepper. Started again walking at 12:30. Got to Shirako, a nice little village in a dell. At this place, at the Itabashi Bridge, and at a place we passed in the afternoon by the banks of a small stream called Yanasegawa, joining the Shimoitabashi River at Hikimata, were the only paddy fields we saw today. Sano and his comrade remarked this absence of paddy fields so often that I at last asked them the reason, and Sano replied that paddy fields gave the peasants so much less labor than arable land, and therefore he looked on it with more pleasure. The country is splendidly wooded, groves of keyaki and cryptomeria, and numbers of other trees. Beautiful view of Fuji soon after leaving Itabashi, which continued nearly all the way to Oi, where I now am, and we saw the smoke of Asamayama, although not the mountain itself, a little before reaching Shirako, tea house Kameya, where traces of foreign influence exist in the shape of 4-legged stools and stolid attendants. Left Shirako at 2:30 in the kago. Kojiro in a post kago. The 2 guards still walking. Jinriksha all the way. I must have slept a little in my palanquin and woke just before getting to Nobidome, where I alighted. We rested here for a quarter of an hour. The people said that the name of the place was given to it in consequence of a prairie fire having stopped there. The etymologies of a great many Japanese places are easily discovered because the language is still in what Max Müller would call a semi-agglutinative state. At Itabashi, there was formerly a wooden bridge above Kami and one below Shimo on the same stream, which accounts for Shimo being nearer to Yedo than Kami Itabashi. Kawagoe is, of course, the place where this road passes over the river, and at Oi, no doubt, there formerly existed a big well. I walked from Nobidome to Oi, 2 good ri. From the river Yanase here, the road is despairly straight. but good and lined with trees. In some places, avenues of cryptomeria. In others, especially where there are farmhouses, nothing but keyaki. The people were sweeping up the fallen leaves and burning them to make manure. We were passed by 5 men bearing heavy burdens over their shoulders on poles in the usual style, but held with both hands across the road. We were walking pretty fast, and yet they outstripped us. On being interrogated, they said they were going to Kawagoe, 30 good miles from the Nihonbashi, whence they had started at 10 o'clock in the morning. The name of the hotel is Kashiwaya, people quiet and respectful. Foreigners had stopped here the year before last, and there were folding chairs in consequence. There was a note about Max Müller, which I added. Chairs in consequence. These I had removed, preferring the satin cushion from my kago. A wing all to myself consisting of 2 6-mat rooms, a little garden with some fine chrysanthemums. A recess with the portrait of an ideal Japanese beauty in a light blue robe covered with enormous carp. I had provided myself with a couple of candlesticks and some candles and was enabled to dispense with the Japanese dips, which require constant snuffing and smell so badly. I invited the 2 guards to drink a cup of sake and eat an omelette, which was the only thing in the way of sakana which this retired village could furnish. I think sakana here being food and not fish. We had a séance over the map of Musashi. When the guards perceived from my not offering them any more to drink that their presence was no longer wanted, they retired with profound obeisances, carrying off their unfinished plates of omelette, a proceeding which showed their excellent breeding. Kojiro was excellent in the attitude of attention, with his hands duly pressed on the mats. He is a sulky-looking boy, but that is only his modesty. Takanawa to Suidobashi, 2-ri, Itabashi, 2-ri, Nerima, 26 cho, 4.26. 4.26 to Shirako, 1.1. Hisaori 1, Owada 1.8, Oi 1.18, 9.18 total. November 20th. After my ablutions of the lightest kind had been performed on the open veranda of my room, I took my seat again to commence the Eunuchus, having finished the how manyth reperusal of the Andria yesterday. A damsel brought in tea with salt plums sprinkled with sugar. These latter are not disagreeable and purify the palate. Then my breakfast consisted of the usual miso soup, rice, and tamago toji, some dried sepia with shavings of katsuobushi. Interrupted for a moment by mine host, who gently pushed a slide of the veranda aside and said, after a profound bow, "Hiemashite gozaimasu. It is cold." He then bowed again and closed the screen. Next came the guards, as soon as breakfast was removed, and the following was the procedure. "Ohayo gozaimasu" from both, with bows reciprocated on my part. San, "It is fine weather, sir. When we got up this morning, it was very cloudy, but now it has changed to fine weather." Sato, "I think it is not so cold as yesterday." San, "Exactly so, sir. It is considerably warm. These chrysanthemums display a great deal of industry. Yesterday there were chrysanthemums in an odd place." Sato, "Just so, opposite to the resting station." To, "In a perfectly dark place." Sato, "In the very middle of a wood, bows and retire." Started at 8 in my kago, in which I rode as far as the other side of Kawagoe. We made one stopping of a quarter of an hour on the way. Kawagoe is a large, straggling town. All that could be seen of the castle was a couple of grassy earthworks, behind which rose lofty trees. The river was on the other side of the town, as I had expected. Got out to walk as soon as we reached the paddy fields. Nothing but paddy fields here, but arable land up to the other side of Kawagoe. Crossed the river Iruma just below the junction of the Tokigawa with it by a ferry, to a place put down as a post town in my map, but with only 2 wretched houses where nothing could be got. The rest of the place consisted of peasants' huts. Left the kago and my traveling bag behind here and walked on to Nakayama, where there are 2 decent roadside eating houses. Arrived at the first of these by 12:15. Sat down to have some rice and maguro soup. The kago came up in a few minutes, not having been able to get anything to eat at Igusa without waiting. Maguro would be tuna. Yeah. Left again on foot at 1, walked on through endless paddy fields, got on a bit of a causeway overhanging the Iruma, from which there was a fine view over to the woods and the mountain range beyond. Cloudy weather, so that Fiji, that should be Fuji, could not have been seen, even if he had been within our horizon. More paddy fields, then a slight rise, which changed the nature of the cultivation and led us through woods. The foliage all red, brown, and yellow. To know this country as it should also be seen in early spring with fresh green on the trees. After passing a village called Kashiwazaki, turn down a path to the left, marked by a cylindrical pillar, 4 cho to the shrine of Inari of Matsuyama, margin, called Yakyu Inari. There are several tea houses close to the shrine where one might lodge at a pinch. Rather large shrine with offerings of no great antiquity. One fine wood carving in high relief, representing a hero on horseback, the ground gilt, and the carving probably fixed onto it. A board with 10 dials, a couple of inches square, with a black bullseye in the center, offered up by pupils of one Hida Kuninosuke, apparently an instructor in marksmanship and a follower of the famous Takashima. Others were a pagoda, a Shinto arch, and the characters Hono, dedication, offering, in the best copper cash nailed onto boards. Bought a specimen of all the charms, one against fire, another against thieves, and one to be borne in the bosom, as well as the portrait of the god armed with bow and arrow and standing on a fox's back. Just in front of the temple stands a giant cryptomeria, on the trunk of which were affixed 4 representations of human beings stuck through with good-sized nails in all parts, evidencing the existence of jealous maids and faithless swains in these parts. About a quarter of a mile brought us to Matsuyama, a decent-sized town where some 2 sworded men of the Maebashi ken inhabit. Hotel Kojiya, evidently very old, standing at the corner of 2 streets, opposite the road which leads to Konosu. Bathroom with a partition halfway down from the ceiling to protect the modesty of the occupants of the bath. Temple close by, festival, crowd of children playing indecorously through it. It may be generally remarked that the temples are more used as children's playrooms than as anything else. Now that the daimyos are abolished and their towns simply centers of local government, what will become of them and of the post towns, except those on the great roads, which have no manufactures? Very good dinner, maguro and snipe. Began Modeste Mignon, a charming novel by Honoré de Balzac. Also taxed my patience severely, for we got in at 2:45 and I was too tired to do any more. Oi to Kawagoe, 2.5. To Igusa, 2. To Matsuyama, 3, 7.5 total. November 21st. Woke in the morning to hear the rain falling heavily on the tiles. Walking was evidently out of the question. Prepared for a melancholy day in my kago. Set off at 10:15. The kago enveloped me in a huge sheet of oil paper. Smell of which was disagreeable at first. Roads very bad and progress slow. Reached the ferry on the river Arakawa, which is one of the chief tributaries of the Sumitagawa, at 1 p.m. Halted for half an hour, during which time the coolies fed. The halting place was a sort of universal store. Left at 1:30 and reached Konosu, Hotel Isea Haemon, at 2:30, though they said the distance was only 15 cho. Eat midday meal here and provided myself with native smoking apparatus, as I shall be out of cheroots tomorrow. It is not strong enough to hurt one, and filling the pipe and tapping on the edge of the firebox is a distraction. If it is possible to exist a moment without thinking, it must be while a man is filling his pipe and inhaling the required 2 whiffs. With the tap on the hibachi, the stove, Japanese stove, he returns to the world again, and you may talk to him. Left at 4:15 and reached Okegawa in the dark at 6:10. Well, hibachi is a kind of open fire contained. Hotel Kurihara Gonzaemon, who will not confess to any house name, left-hand side going towards Edo. Finished Modeste Mignon and the Eunuchus. Matsuyama to Konosu, 3 ri, to Okegawa, 1.36 cho. Excuse me. November 22nd, pretty garden in Japanese style at the back of hotel with pond full of goldfish. Started at 8:30, got out of my kago at the end of the town and walked all the rest of the way. Passed through Ageo, a wretched town with scarcely a hotel in it, besides that where the daimyos used to stop, called Honjin. Part appeared to have been recently destroyed by fire. Arrived at Tenjin at 10, a resting place. Divided between 2 flourishing tea houses which to go to. Chose one on the right of the road, a rather magnificent establishment. A detached building between the 2 gates, the roof of which was covered with the shells of awabi, abalone, thrown there after the contents had been eaten. 8 half-dried persimmons, excellent. Also a green leaf full of mustard, very hot. Left at 10:20, road getting drier. Fine view of Fuji and the mountains on the borders of Musashi at intervals. A little before the entrance of Omiya turned up to the left under a red Shinto arch through the field to the Hikawa no Yashiro, dedicated to Sosano no Mikoto. Here the Mikado comes at times to worship, it being the largest shrine in the province of Musashi. Pond crossed by a bridge and surrounded by gigantic hinoki, cypress, and cryptomeriae. 3 shrines, one with locked doors, a wall round it, and a lofty shed in front, evidently that to which the Mikado comes to worship. Grounds very long, avenues extending away to beyond the other end of the town. Omiya, of course, takes its name from this shrine, established by Yamato Take no Mikoto in blank. Instead of going right down the avenue, turned off at a small stone bridge, slightly arched, to the Nakasendo again, which I entered at the commencement of the town. Passed a couple of honjin and walked some way before we could find a place to lunch in. When we found it, it was shabby in the extreme. The only thing pleasing about it was a brood of small black and white bantams called the chessboard, Goishi no Tane breed. Got here at 11:30 and left at 12:15. Road very much drier. Passed through Urawa, a shabby town, and rested at a place just beyond, opposite a shrine called Tsukinomiya, or the Moon's Temple, at 1:30. Rested a quarter of an hour, during which time we all ate some exceedingly sour oranges called eko, which I had bought on the road, called at the shrine opposite. 2 fine dwarf pines at the entrance, and 2 stone hares, emblems of the moon, on pedestals, exceedingly ill carved. Same in relief on the bronze receptacle for holy water. Past Warabi, where I had at first intended to stop, a decent-looking town, and rested at a wayside house called Fujimichaya, just outside. Lovely view of Fuji, the small crater on the shoulder very distinct, all covered with snow, which fell during yesterday, at least the greater part. Rested 10 minutes and started at 2:50. Wind in our backs, driving us along as if we had all sails set. Shiri ni ho o kaketa yo ni, as I heard the steed of a manpower strength cart, jinriksha, say to his passenger. Road even stony and quite dry. Met a number of 2-sworded men at various intervals, bound for places in Echigo and Shinshu. Got to a wide river over which we had to be ferried, evidently to us the lower part of the Arakawa, which we crossed yesterday. The boatman, however, insisted that it was called the Todagawa. On landing, I saw a post with "From the middle of the Arakawa south" written on it, and shouted to the ferryman, "Art thou not a fool? Look at the post." But he heard me not. I found afterwards that the village whence we had crossed bore the name of Toda. In Japan, the river is known by the name of the place it passes, so that for those people, the Thames would be the Oxford River, the Staines River, etc. Truly, the frog in the well knows not the ocean. Inonaka no Kawazu is referenced there. A frog in the bottom of the well is a Japanese proverb. This river was crossed at 3:15. To it succeeded a wide moor, partially reclaimed, where the foreign sportsman from Edo comes in pursuit of ducks and geese. The wind blew us unrelentingly along the road which crosses it. At the further side, at the foot of a sort of tableland which I fancy extends to Edo, several bubbling wells, objects of great curiosity to the natives. They drive sharpened bamboo tubes into the soft ground and are astonished that the water rises of itself above the level of the earth. Ascended the hill and rested 10 minutes. At 4 in motion again for Itabashi, said to be distant 25 cho, or 1 mile and 2/3. Along the high roads in Japan, the distances are officially measured from one tonyaba, the place where one changes coolies, to another. Road level between green hedges for the greater part of the way. At a post with the legend "Within the land of the post town of Itabashi," the road descends towards the stream. Remarkable bank on the right-hand side with great naked roots of trees, probably keyaki, now cut down. Standing upright, like rows of pillars. The stump of an old enoki also, opposite an old woman who sells pictures of it, and morsels of the rotten wood, which when made into a decoction resembling tea and given to a damsel one wishes to get rid of, has the effect of breaking off the connection. Arrive at 4:30 at Mariya Hotel, picturesquely situated on the stream by the bridge on the right-hand Kyoto side. At night, the kudai from the room furthest from the road which I occupy is most romantic. The dark flowing water sheer underneath the veranda, a balustrade stretching right away to the bridge on which shadowy forms pass backwards and forwards. Opposite, gloomy masses of trees overhanging the stream, and the moon, now 10 days old, reflected in fragments from its surface. If I were in love or the weather removed back 3 months, I should remain gazing all night. Okigawa to Ageo, 30 cho. Omiya to Ri, Urawa, 1 Ri, 10 cho. Warabi, 1 Ri, 14 cho. Itabashi, 2 Ri, 8 cho. Total 8 Ri, 26 cho. November 23rd, left Itabashi at 8:30 by a cross-country path a little way up the street. About 9:30, I got to a temple of the Hokke sect, dedicated to a god named Kishibojin, amid fine trees. Formerly much frequented, but of late years rather displaced in popular flavor by the temple at Horinouchi. Quantities of clothing for infants offered up by parents who have got babies from the influence of prayers at this shrine. The same clothing let out to people who have sick children. Also a quantity of dolls called daruma without legs who recover their balance if pushed out of it in a wonderful manner. These are lent to parents whose children have smallpox, and they have the virtue of moderating the violence of the attack. A little before 10, got to the house of Takemoto Yosai, an ex-Gaikoku Bugyo. There's a note below about that, of the shogun's government, who makes a living now by potteries and a brickfield. He had got up a sort of would-be universal exhibition of pottery, lacquer, birds, animals, vegetables, etc. The objects which most attracted my attention were some small birds called Beni Suzume and a series of pictures of the 500 rakan, drawn and painted not with lines but with the character kyo, repeated myriads of times. The expression of the faces was extremely varied and in many cases lifelike. Those exhibited formed only part of a series of 50 pictures 6 feet high by 2.5 wide. The artist was an incredibly long time over the work, and it was his last. Arrived at home 2 minutes after 12, after having raced myself off my legs to get in before the hour. November 26, Adams and I dined with Iwakura Tomomi. Discussed the embassy. They are going to send Ito and Yamaguchi as vice ambassadors, besides Kido and Okubo, but Iwakura is to be chief. He described to us the ancient ceremonial observed at New Year's Day audiences. No crawling, but advancing with slow steps, shaku in one hand, dropping first on one knee and then the other, rising again, repeated thrice. Was placed in retirement in 1862 because of the part he took in Ohara Sanni's, is that Ohara Shigetomi, famous mission to Edo. The Kuges made frequent attempts to restore the Mikado, even under the Tokugawa, and were uniformly unsuccessful. His own great-grandfather had been fearfully bullied for conspiring with this object. Adams advised him against letting the Mikado go to Yokohama, and he asked him to go to Sanjo and say the same to him. The Progressist Party are going ahead too fast, so he thinks, and so do Adams and I. Put a spoke in the Americans' wheel about Korea. Fancy old Rogers wanting them to make war on Korea to consolidate their internal condition. Also talked about the China Treaty fiasco, a very disagreeable subject apparently. I don't think they will ratify the treaty as it stands, and am of opinion that there is little need to press them. November 30th, dined with Kido. He said that he respected highly the Christian religion and was in favor of introducing it into Japan, or at least of allowing its practice. Someone has addressed a memorial to the Mikado on the subject, nominally as a memorial from a foreigner. A certain Watanabe Nobori Kasan, a Karo of Miyake Shima no Kami, wrote a book called Yume Monogatari. He was obliged to perform seppuku on account of his knowledge of European matters and was suspected of a leaning towards foreigners. December 4th, visit from Mori Ryo-un, formerly Matsumoto Jiudayu, governor of Osaka and of Sakai at the time of the revolution. Fled to America and studied agriculture for 2.5 years. Is now a farmer at Naito Shinjuku, Kitazawa-mura. Was accused of having run away with large sums of money belonging to the Tokugawa family. Says I saved him from Sahari's wrath on one occasion. Also visit from Narita. His newspaper has just appeared. He is sent as a messenger to the chief Shinto temple of Wakasa and to promulgate the Shinto religion in those parts, but does not wish to stay. Asked me to intercede for him with some of my acquaintances in high places to get him a small appointment of whatever kind in order that he may be ordered back to Yedo. December the 5th, visit Prince of Awa and a relation named Hachisuka Kano. Awa in Tokushima, that is. Or in Shikoku. Awa in Shikoku. The Tokushima domain. They are going to Europe in the next first month and wanted information. They talk of going by the French mail by way of variety. I have not dissuaded them. Went to Yokohama to assist Iwakura choose his outfit. December 12th, called upon Date Junii and obtained from him copy of the obnoxious article in the treaty concluded by him with China. It is modeled on the Chinese version of the American-Chinese Treaty Article number 1, in which reciprocal assistance and mediation are stipulated for. I do not think it could ever be construed to mean material aid with men or ships. Date Jiushi was there also and showed great deference to Jiuni, his adopted father. The latter spoke of him as his segare, son. It shows that the adopted children are just on the same footing as actually begotten children. December 13th, the Mikado's naval review. We could not see or hear anything of it from the shore. Itagaki came to see me, and I asked him to get some nominal place for Narita in order that the latter might be enabled to return to Edo honorably. It seems that the credit of his clan is involved in going on this Shinto mission to Tsuruga. They could not and probably would not ask for him to be relieved of this duty, and that explains his having recourse to the mediation of a foreigner. December the 14th, went to Yokohama to help the ex-Prince of Awa and his wife choose their outfits. They are going to England for several years. The wife is young and pretty in Japanese style. Mrs. Hannon dressed her up in a grey silk dress and a black lace bonnet with red roses, which suited her admirably. In the evening, they sent us 2 huge boxes of eggs and a piece of crepe for each of us. December 16th, returned to Yedo for the dinner to the embassy, the Iwakura mission, that is. Iwakura came earlier than the others except Yamaguchi, who arrived 3/4 of an hour before his time. We told him that the Russians are going to send a plenipotentiary to treat about Sakhalin next year, and he informed us that Soejima would be appointed foreign minister to conduct the negotiation. We drank the success of the embassy. December 17th, Ito Hirobumi sent me a curious memorial by a Tokugawa man, Nakamura Keishi, under the disguise of a foreigner, advising the Mikado to be baptized and to become the head of the Christian religion in Japan. This is the document Kido spoke to me about when I last saw him. Takenouchi Magosuke came to see me and talked for a couple of hours. December 18th, visit from Oki Taizo and the ex-prince of Inshu. The latter is the elder brother surviving of Keiki, Yoshinobu, the last shogun. Behaved politely and seemed a reasonable being enough, quite unlike Dubusque's account of him. Dubusque has entered the Japanese service on 650 yen a month, a disagreeable sort of thing to be driven to. He is going with the embassy to Europe and hopes to stay behind. Young Sendai came in while they were here. He is a horrid bear, though he doesn't mean it. He is going for 5 years to England and Okudaira, one of his brothers, to America. December 21st, dinner at Van der Hervens of Diplomatic Body and Japanese Embassy. December 22nd, dinner at the rooms behind the Saibansho law courts given by Japanese Embassy to Diplomatic Body. Stupid as such dinners usually are. Tommy reappeared as interpreter and made Iwakura say he hoped the representatives would do their duty during his absence. And the diary for 1871 ends here, page 36. 1872 is next, of course, but I shall stop here and continue again on another occasion. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.